Hello, my name is Brian Smith. I would like to welcome you all to Greenfield Community College, and I would like to thank you for joining us for our new student orientation presentation. The orientation presentation is broken into three sections. First, we're going to talk about the beginning of the semester and different services, policies, procedures of the college that you should all be aware of. We usually assume that students are in a mixed progression through some of these beginning services. So there may be some familiarity with these topics. Some of this information may be brand new. So I'm going to do my best to present this information in a way that addresses the main points. It assumes that you have a slight familiarity with the content, but certainly if you have questions, use the contact information located in the Moodle course to contact us, follow up with us, and let us know if there's any way that we can further explain this content to you. To start, we always like to start with just a general understanding of the campus and its features. As many of you would be aware, we have two primary buildings located on the main campus. We have one referred to as the main building, which is broken into the north, core, and south. The east building is the rectangular laid out building to the east. We also have a downtown center, but the downtown center primarily houses our LPM program and our not-for-credit community education and workforce development programming. So in most cases, your programming will happen at one of these two primary buildings. The campus is equipped with 5 lots for student use that have handicap parking spaces for compact cars, carpooling, and things of that nature. There's one lot that we ask that you don't park in. That would be Lot F. It is reserved for faculty and staff. Students who choose to park in those spaces are subject to fines, so we encourage you not to do that. But please let us know if you have any parking concerns. Public safety can assist you with that. In terms of the layout of the building, it's often presumed that it makes sense to students on their first day on campus, and that's probably a false assumption. The main campus is divided again into those 3 sections, the south, the core, and the north. The building sort of cascades up the side of the mountainside that we're built on, and so there's a tendency to find sort of odd hallways and partial staircases, and it can be a bit confusing to navigate. The core is a recent renovation. It opened about 3 years ago, and the core was an attempt to unify the south and the north buildings with a few more direct hallways. And so here's an example of the first floor with a very direct hallway that leads to all 3 sections. This is primarily your administrative floor. And the second, third, and fourth floor will have a similar layout. Again, just as it backs up along the hillside. In terms of the room numbering scheme, the first letter in the room number assignment will refer to what section of the building you're located again. So in this example, S214A, this would be a room that's located in the south wing on the 2nd floor in room 14A. So the first letter indicates what section of the building or what building it's located in. The 100 series identifies what floor of the building you're on, and then the final 2 digits and sometimes a letter will indicate what room you're actually in. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. In terms of our day of the week scheduling, again, we make a lot of assumptions that this is self-explanatory, but it usually can cause a few students to be confused. A typical college schedule might read Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that would be designated by MWF. Sometimes courses will meet 2 days a week, so it may be common to see MW, or a class may meet 1 day a week, so you may see a Tuesday T or Friday F as a 1-day only class. Usually the point of confusion that we usually experience with students would be a Tuesday-Thursday class. Here at GCC, Tuesdays are designated by T, Thursday is designated by R. So sometimes students see the designation TR on their schedule. They assume that that means Thursday only. That does not. If you see the designation TR, that means Tuesday and Thursday. If it's a Thursday only class, you will see that R designation. Okay, so again, some of those services that we're assuming you have some familiarity with, we're going to review these services, but that should include the Enrollment Services Office, the Testing Center, the Advising Center, hopefully financial aid, the Bursar's Office, library, and our bookstore. So let's look a little bit more. So Enrollment Services, they're located on the 1st floor in room C103. Enrollment Services houses both our Office of Admission as well as the Office of the Registrar. Now, the Office of Admission is likely the office that all of you have currently worked with. Whether you applied online or whether you applied in person, the Office of Admission handled those initial applications. So they've processed those, they've accepted you, so that's why you all have become students here at GCC. But once they finish with that initial process, there's several reasons you may come back to the Office of Admission, and we want to address those. So sometimes a student will apply to one of our specialized occupation programs. That may be criminal justice, early education, the human services program, our LPN, our LPN program, our RN program, any program that may have either an additional application process, health records, or some type of physical that may be required, an additional query process. The Office of Admission will be the office that will handle all of those. And so if you see any type of correspondence coming from the Office of Admission, it's an office that you need to follow up with. They're also the place where you would bring any high school transcripts, proof of graduation, things like that. So the Office of Admission does the initial processing for all students, but there's several other reasons you may come back, and those are some of the primary ones. The Office of Admission also oversees our testing center, and most commonly our students have used the testing center for the AccuPlacer. That was the placement diagnostic test for both reading and math to help you decide what classes meet your current skill levels. And so it's a great space to begin that process. But the testing center is also used for several other purposes. We're going to address the testing center in just a moment with a little more detail. Now, the Registrars Office is also located in Enrollment Services. Once the admission office has completed the application and accepted you into the college, your file now moves over to the responsibility of the registrar. So the registrar will maintain your file going forward. So anytime you do something on campus, whether it's completing courses, registering, adding, or dropping, we'll discuss that in detail. If you change your address, if you want to demonstrate to an employer or some other type of agency that provides you with benefits that you're enrolled in coursework, the Registrar's Office is going to be that place. Okay? So again, changing of majors, it's a common practice. Many students change their majors depending on where you are in the progression of your degree. It can be a simple process. Sometimes it's a little more challenging to make those changes. But the official change of a major will happen with the Registrar's Office. Often students will require an unofficial or an official transcript, especially if they're transferring to another institution. The Registrar's Office will process those for you. Enrollment verification, so again, those benefits, anything that you need for an employer, for a state or federal agency that may be providing you with some type of benefit. If they require enrollment verifications, the Registrar's Office is the only office that can certify those for you. And graduation applications for either your degrees or for your certifications, again, that will come from the Registrar's Office. And the Registrar's Office also sets several other policy deadlines that we'll talk about in just a moment, especially when we deal with advising. But this is a really important office to be familiar with. Students don't often have to interact with this office, and so they sometimes don't completely understand the role of the Registrar's Office on campus. But it's important to note that if you see anything coming to you in your student email, or if you hear any announcements on campus coming from the registrar, it's definitely a notice that you want to pay attention to. So the testing center, we referred to that back in the admission slide. The testing center is also located on the first floor in C110. Again, AccuPlacer is the most common reason that many of our students have used the testing center. And if you've taken your tests and you've gone through that experience, you'll realize that there's no time limit for the AccuPlacer. We use the results to help a student determine what's the best placement in terms of college or developmental level work. And it's a space that it's pretty quiet to do your testing with very few distractions. Because of that, many students also use this as a space for accommodation testing. So later my colleague Sarah will be discussing with all of you the accommodations process, but some students will use the testing center as an alternative testing space, and so there's a process for that. Again, our students often use this space for when they need to make up a test, and so if you've missed an examination with your professor and your professor has agreed to a makeup exam, usually the testing center is the location where that will happen. So it's always good to become familiar with the space, think about ways in which this space may be of best use to you, and always be willing to have a conversation with your professor or other staff members on campus around whether or not the testing center may be an appropriate fit for whatever your situation may be. The Advising Center. Now, I'm hoping that many of you have already interacted with the Advising Center. This should have been your next stop after the admission office and the testing center. The Advising Center is located on the first floor in room C118. The Advising Center is the first stop for all new students. It's also the first stop for all returning students, students who have been away for a few years and they're deciding to come back. It's very likely that your advisor that you once had has since left. And so the Advising Center would be your initial stop for registration, for advisement around what courses to take, and to start to set the plan for you as you move forward into the semester. The Advising Center, again, great for that initial advising appointment. Once that first semester begins, and so at this point, everybody should have a advisor assigned to them, and we'll talk about how you can find that advisor assignment. But the Advising Center is responsible for making those assignments, and it's also the place you would go to change that advisor assignment. Advisors are great resources. You can always use them for course registration, and that's probably the most common reason that many students work with their advisors, but they're also a great resource to discuss transfer to other institutions, to discuss career advice, to review your degree audit, which is a very common thing that students should be mindful of, and they can also help you make referrals to other campus resources. Here at GCC, we absolutely value the advising relationship. We believe in it, and so we make certain times available throughout the semester for advisors to meet one-on-one with their advisees. But ultimately, we can't stress enough that the advising relationship is dependent on your willingness to participate. So if your advisor reaches out to you, either by phone, by email, maybe something in the hallway, they invite you to come in for an advising appointment, or they're trying to follow up with you because they've received an early progress report, we highly, highly recommend that you respond to your advisor, engage them in the process, let them know how they can help you best. Ultimately, if you are not finding a connection between you and your advisor, that's okay. We want to make sure that you're getting the service, the support that you need. And so all you have to do is go back to the Advising Center, let them know that you could use additional support, and maybe a change of advisor would help with that. It's very likely that you've already encountered a faculty member or staff member on campus that you've developed a connection with. It's possible that they have room on their advising load, and so if you find that that is a situation that exists for you, an advisor or staff member that you'd like to have as an advisor, you can always go down, ask the advising office for assistance with making that switch. There's a form, a very simple form that needs to be completed where your new advisor can sign off, and they'll make that switch. We just highly encourage you, do not just disregard this relationships and try to do the advising on your own. It's not that you don't have tools, and we'll discuss some of those tools with you at your disposal. But there's some nuances with many of these degree programs and some of these requirements that an experienced advisor can assist you with and hopefully prevent you from making some mistakes that could cost you time and money. Okay, in terms of add, drop, and withdrawal, and many students have heard of these terms. Sometimes there's a little mystery as to when each of them applies, but the reality is there are different policies for adding, dropping, and withdrawing from classes, from programs, from the college. There's different deadlines for all of these things, and they have significant impacts both on your academics as well as your financials. And so we really want to make sure that we're clear with students about what these mean. So when we discuss adding and dropping classes, we're referring to a process where a student physically goes into the Advising Center, goes into the Registrars Office, makes a conscious decision to either add a course, so maybe you scheduled a late schedule for a particular term and you've now decided that you can handle one more class, or maybe you're going to drop one course that you signed up for and you'd like to add another one. So this is an active process. Some students think that they have just emailed their advisor that they want this to happen. It will just happen for them. This is something that a student should expect to come into an office, fill out a form, and make sure that you're engaged in the process about this, okay? We always want to make sure that we've talked to both your academic advisors to think about how this is going to impact future course enrollment. Some courses are based on prerequisites, so if you haven't finished one course, sometimes it can prevent you from getting into the next course that you need. Some courses are only offered once a semester or once a year, and so we want to make sure students have thought about those course sequences before they make an add or a drop. There's also a potential impact to your financial aid. Many of our students receive federal financial aid or they've accepted loans, and it's usually based on credit load that has been assigned to your account for the term. So we want to make sure that before you do any adding and dropping, that you've had a consultation with both your academic advisor as well as your financial aid advisor, just to understand how this is going to impact you. There is a difference between the terms dropping and withdrawal. Here at GCC, when we're talking about dropping, we're talking about a process that happens in the first 2 weeks of a semester. And when I'm talking about a semester, I'm talking about fall and spring, our traditional semesters that last just over 14 weeks. In the first 2 weeks, you can drop a course. There's usually a financial break, and we're going to discuss those in a little greater detail in just a moment. It removes the record from your transcript. So if I was originally registered for 15 credits, I make a decision to drop one 3-credit course, and I do that in the first 2 weeks. I may receive a financial benefit for that, and I may also have that come off my record, and so it would now show I only am taking 12 credits, but it won't show that I attempted that last course. But it's important to note that even if I've done those things and it takes that record off, it still could have an impact on my financial aid. So I still want to talk to them. Instead, if I'm talking about withdrawing, there's 2 ways that we think about withdrawal. First is I can withdraw from a single course, but that would be after the drop period has happened. It does leave a mark on my transcript. There are no financial breaks for somebody in this situation, and because it leaves that mark on your transcript, it will impact future financial aid awards. So it's, again, important to be aware of that and discuss that with the financial aid office. The other form of withdrawal would be to withdraw from the college, and we can talk about that in just a moment. Again, it's important to note that even though that withdrawal is on the transcript, it's going to show in the grade column as a W, and it does impact your financial aid. What it does not impact is your GPA. So students who are trying to be very mindful of the grade point average may be interested in this option. If your choice is to potentially fail a course or to withdraw a course, in an attempt to preserve your GPA, you may want to go through with the withdrawal process for that course, and then avoid failing, which would bring down that GPA. Again, the other reason that you would want to withdraw, I just mentioned, would be to withdraw from the college. Some students come into the college for a term, life situations change, and that's a reality for many of our students, and that's okay. But rather than fail all the courses, a student may choose to withdraw from the semester. There's a process for that in the Registrars Office. It does require your advisor just to sign off. So again, you just want to have that conversation with your advisor. You want to have a conversation with your financial aid advisor just to make sure that when you withdraw from the college, everybody's on the same page for what the potential impacts are for you. And then you make a well-informed decision. And then the Registrar's Office would be the place where that would be completed. In terms of important dates, and these are dates that are aligned with those add, drop, and withdraw dates that we just discussed. In front of you, we have the spring 2015 deadlines and dates. Now, this is something that's coming right off the academic calendar, so that student packet that you downloaded has a copy of the entire fall 2014 through spring 2015 academic calendar. Every year, a new calendar is produced, so become familiar with this calendar. But here are the highlights from the spring 2015 section. February 3rd is the last day to add. And February 3rd is also the last day to drop a course or to withdraw from the college with a 100% refund. So no records. You have attempted the course for a week, but for whatever reason you've made a decision that you need to drop these courses or to withdraw, and this gives you a 100% refund for whatever you expended for the courses. February 10th is the last day to drop with a 75% refund. So again, you've attempted coursework for 2 weeks, you've made a decision to drop a course or to withdraw from the college, and this would allow you to do so, remove the record off your account, but it would also allow you to receive a 75% refund, while 25% is maintained by the college as an administration fee. Now, March 3rd is the last day to drop with no record. So you can still drop from February 11th and remove the coursework or withdraw from the college with no record, but there are no financial breaks at this point. Now, April 2nd, I told you that the advising relationship is something that we value here on campus, and because of that, we cancel courses one day every semester so that advisors, both faculty and staff, have time to meet with students one-on-one. So advising day is April 2nd this semester. There are no day classes. There may be evening classes, but this is a perfect time to come in and get your fall schedules or your summer schedules straightened away. Now, April 14th will be the last day to drop or withdraw from the college with a grade of W. So after the last day to drop with no record, you can still leave the college. You can drop a course. You can withdraw from the college, but it's going to leave a W in the grade column on your transcript. There's no way to get around that. But again, this may be the alternative that you want to seek instead of risking the chance of failing a course. I mentioned earlier that another important service that happens in the Advising Center is our Transfer Office. Kathy Maisto is our transfer coordinator. She can help you with anything under mass transfer, any of our special articulations, either with ELMS or with Endicott College. We have several other private college agreements in place. So if you're a student who is thinking that maybe you want to talk about going on to another institution to finish your bachelor's degree after your time here at GCC, Kathy Maisto is the person that you're going to want to speak to. That does not mean that you cannot work with your own advisor, but they're likely at some point going to connect you directly with Kathleen to specifically map out exactly what your transfer is going to look like. It is never too early to have this conversation, even if you don't know exactly what it is you want to do. Many of our liberal arts students are coming in undecided about their future bachelor's degrees. They want to do a little exploration. Kathy has the resources and the tools to sort of help you narrow down your options. Her website, which is off of the main GCC website with a /transfer, has many of these resources, so feel free to take a look at those and explore that section of the website. But it is never too early to set up an appointment. She often encourages students to come in their first or second semester to start those conversations, to make those plans. It's too late if you're waiting till the semester that you're ready to graduate. So please don't do that. Now the Financial Aid Office. The Financial Aid Office and the Bursar's Office, they share a suite. They're also on the first floor in room C102, but we will start our discussion with the Financial Aid Office. And my hope is that you have all begun your time here at GCC with a good conversation with our financial aid officers. So the primary way that many of our students fund their time here at GCC is using the federal financial aid system. And there's several aspects of financial aid that we want to make sure that students are aware of. In terms of financial aid, it's something that students apply for every year. And so students will complete what is known as the FAFSA, which is a free application, and we're going to discuss that in a little bit of greater detail in just a moment. But that is a process that is done every academic year, and when we're talking academic year, we mean a fall application that would cover an application that would cover both fall and spring. Sometimes students come in the middle of a year, and so you may come in for the spring, so you have to file a FAFSA application, and then you're going to continue in the fall, so you have to file again. But typically it's good for one academic year. Aid comes in many different forms. Most students think of federal financial aid as grants or free money. And that is certainly true. That does exist for many students, but there are several other forms of financial aid that we want to be upfront about. Loans, this is something that many students are also eligible for, but loans come to a student as a debt. So students are taking money out in their name. It is money that usually is accruing interest while you're in school, and it is money that will have to be repaid upon separation from the college. So if a student leaves GCC and doesn't enroll in another institution, or if they've graduated and they're ready to go on and pursue their intended career, anybody who took out a student loan will need to begin to repay that money, and that money usually begins repayment about 6 months after separation, again, either graduation or a separation for other purposes. And so students want to be very mindful when they're taking out loans, and our financial aid officers are great about talking to students about what they truly need for funding to support their education, so that students hopefully are not taking out more than they truly need. Work study is another form of financial aid that some students are eligible for. Our financial aid office will let you know if that is the case for you. And work study comes in the form of a job. So students are offered work study funding. There are jobs that happen on campus that students are made aware of. Students can apply for these positions, and the money worked comes to you in the form of a payment, just like a check would at any other employer. And this is money that is intended for students to use for educational costs or living expenses while they're enrolled in school. In terms of financial aid, we have several different definitions of full-time or part-time, but in terms of financial aid, when we talk about full-time, we are talking about the student who has 12 or more credits. When we're discussing part-time, we're talking about the student who has 6 or more credits. Usually, these are the two categories that financial aid is looking at when they're trying to make a determination about a student and their eligibility and what will be covered by financial aid. But there are situations where a student may only have 9 credits, or a student may have more than 12 credits, or a student may even have less than 6 credits. So you always want to have a conversation with the financial aid office about what your specific plans are and to see how financial aid can be used to help you while you're here. So now we've talked about some of the details, let's talk about how the application system works. So again, FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, is the system that most students are thinking about when they hear about financial aid. It's a federal process. It comes out of the U.S. Department of Education. So students want to go to a .gov website. So that application address is right there. It's FAFSA.ed.gov. Now many of our students have gone on, been successful with this process. Some of our students come to us and let us know that they actually ended up at a .com site, and they were using a service, a for-profit service, a company service, to file their FAFSAs. They didn't know. They just they went to a search engine like Google, they searched for FAFSA, it came up with this website. If you want to go and do this by yourself, or you want to come into our financial aid office and we will help you, you want to look for that .gov extension, otherwise you will be paying to file. Think of it like when you file your TurboTax. Filing your taxes are free, but if you choose to use a service like a TurboTax, you pay for that convenience of having a for-profit entity who understands the system file on your behalf. You do not have to pay anybody to file this, and we will be glad to have you come right into our office without an appointment, and we will help you with that. But if you choose to do it by yourself or come in, regardless, you're going to need your Social Security number, you will need your previous year's tax returns, and you will need to have set up a PIN number. So these are the things that, regardless of how you choose to do it, you will need these 3 things accomplished to at least start the process. And this is one of those processes that once you've done it the first time, the first year is usually the more complicated year. After that, the system remembers your information, and you're simply logging in and you're updating it with the new year's income information. There's some important deadlines that we want to point out. In Massachusetts, the priority deadline for FAFSA is May 1st. Now, that does not mean that you cannot submit a FAFSA application after May 1st. In fact, many people do. What that's saying is in Massachusetts, there is state-level financial aid available to students. And if you want to be considered for that large pot of money, May 1st is the day that they will sort of cap that application pool. So any FAFSA application that is submitted to the federal site before May 1st and all of the materials are complete. Sometimes a student submits some information, they do a follow-up request for information, so you want to make sure you respond to those. But if all of that is done before May 1st, you could be considered for that mass money. Otherwise, continue to submit your FAFSAs. It's important to keep in mind that FAFSA takes 6 to 8 weeks to process. It has to go through the federal site, come down through the state site, and then it's dispersed to the schools. That's true for any college or university, private or public. So you want to keep that in mind. If you're thinking you're going to come in the fall and school starts in September and you're filling out your FAFSA application the last week of August, you could be enrolled in classes, have bills due, and not know until October whether or not you're going to receive financial aid. And we have students who unfortunately make that decision every semester, so please don't do that. But instead, you want to try to do your best to meet that May 1st deadline, and if not, you want to give enough lead time so that you're not wondering whether or not you qualify for financial aid. You also want to register for your classes. When the financial aid office is trying to process your award, they may see your income information, they may see a completed FAFSA application, they may be ready to make the award, but they don't know if you're actually intending to come. Keep in mind that many students are applying to a few different schools, and the FAFSA application allows you to identify 2 2, 3, 4 schools that you want to apply to, so they're ready to give information to any of those schools. The schools need to know whether or not you're truly coming to their institution so they can continue the process. And so if you've decided to come to GCC and you've registered for your classes, great. They can see your schedule in the system. They can tell how many credits you registered for. They can continue that process. If you're not ready to make a schedule yet, you can always let the financial aid office know that your plan is to be part-time or full-time. There's a very quick form that you can just fill out with your student information so that they can continue to process your award with the caveat that eventually you will register for courses and then they can finalize it. But they at least can continue the process. If the financial aid office sees no activity, they're not going to make an award, even though your file is ready to go. Okay? And there's every once in a while the federal office asks the local office, which would be at the college, to verify some documents. So if you see our financial aid office reaching out to you, letting you know that you've been selected for review or they need additional information, do your best to respond to those messages because it could be holding up your processing of your application. So now that you've applied for it and you've met the deadlines, say you've now received it, there's a few things you need to keep in mind in order to keep it. Now again, this is primarily talking about the forms of financial aid that we've already spoken about. The first thing that students need to keep in mind is attendance. Some students believe that attendance, because it's not necessarily always part of the grade calculation for a professor, attendance policies are up to professors, they don't necessarily connect the fact that attendance may be part of the financial aid process. Keep in mind that every semester faculty members have to verify their rosters. That's a process where they let the student affairs folks, the staff folks here at the college, know whether or not students are actually participating in classes. So if a student started attending classes, maybe the first week or two, and then stopped attending, that would be communicated back to the financial aid office. If that is the case, there's a good chance that a student will not have earned the financial aid. So it's not enough just to be income eligible. If a student is actually not going to class, the student is not actually earning their financial aid. The issue is, and as we discussed back with the add drop period, if you've already been here past the add drop period and there's no financial incentive to drop a course and receive a refund, but you've also not been attending classwork and you were assuming that your financial aid award was going to pay the bill, well, now you've lost your financial aid and you cannot seek a refund. So you're left with a bill that now you need to pay out of pocket. And some students unfortunately make this decision. And we don't want you to make that decision. And that's why earlier I was trying to encourage students to make sure that they've both talked to an advisor and they've talked to a financial aid officer before they make their decisions to add, drop, or withdraw. So keep attendance in mind. A few other things to keep in mind are the pieces of SAP, or Satisfactory Academic Progress. These are a few requirements that students need to comply with in order to keep their financial aid. So you need to maintain a minimum GPA of 2.0. So that doesn't mean that you can't fail a class. Sometimes students fail classes, it happens. What this is saying is that overall, your overall GPA is going to maintain a 2.0 or higher, which is about a C average. You're going to complete 2/3 of the classes that you're registered for. So if you register for 3 classes, if you drop or fail or withdraw from one of those classes, but you pass 2 of your classes, you're in compliance. The issues arise if you drop, withdraw, or fail 2 of your classes and only pass 1 of them. You start to slip below that satisfactory academic progress. And there's some warnings, there's some alerts, there's some intervention points where maybe your advisor or the financial aid office will reach out to you, let you know that there's some concern about your progress before you lose your eligibility. But it's important to be aware of those requirements. It's also important to realize that, especially for federal financial aid, that you've been awarded up to 150% of the expected time to receive a bachelor's degree. So here at GCC we offer associate's degrees. We're helping you complete your undergraduate education, which goes through bachelor's. It's important to realize that the federal financial aid system is giving you the allowance to do some exploration. So maybe take a course that maybe doesn't add up specifically to your degree, but within limits. To possibly fail a course or to attempt a course and withdraw from a course. And again, within limits, continue on the degree to your path. If a student starts to tip beyond that 150% time, you're taking credits and not passing them, or maybe you're taking courses outside of your degree plan, you're going to have some type of intervention where they're going to try to steer you back onto your degree path, or you could be in jeopardy of losing your financial aid. So you want to keep that in mind as well. There's wiggle room here. It's intentional. It's to help students so that they don't have to feel pressure, but it's also within the limits. So again, you want to have that conversation with all of those advisors to make sure that you're still on track. So after we've talked about the financial aid office, it's important to note the Bursar's office. These folks have the responsibility of conducting our billing. They're very efficient at their jobs. They're a great office to work with. And the best piece of advice I can impart on students is to just communicate with them. If they don't hear back from students, and sometimes students are nervous to go in and deal with them because they're talking about financial matters, and that can be a bit stressful. They have to assume that a student received their communication if they've heard nothing, and that a student's choosing not to communicate with them. So my first words of wisdom, if I can share those with you, is to please go down, talk to the Bursar's office as soon as you register for courses, have a discussion about your payment plan options, and we're going to discuss some of these details in just a moment, and come up with a plan with them. Let it be intentional as opposed to something that's reactionary. So the Bursar's office, again located in C102, they're responsible for producing all of the student bills, and in terms of spring bills, they were due on January 8th. So if you register in advance, you have some time before your bill is due. If you register after the bill due date, they're going to be due immediately. And so again, after you leave that advising office, it's always good to go right down to the Bursar's office, have a conversation with them about what your plan is, about your anticipated financial aid award, and have a conversation about what that payment plan is going to look like. Some students choose to private pay, and they would like to work out a payment plan system. And so for the fall and spring terms, we offer 4 months of payments. There's an administrative fee for that, but that's definitely something you can discuss with the billing office. We also have options for online bill pay through your My GCC account. They can accept payment in the form of credit, debit from any of the major vendors, Visa, MasterCard, or Discover. They can take an electronic check, personal checks, and cash. But there's also an important service that I want to point out to all students, and that's the requirement for health insurance. The Bursar's office has the responsibility to make sure that students either have health insurance, either by providing it for them or through the waiver process. We're going to discuss that next. So there is a requirement, a law on the books that's been in Massachusetts for several decades, and that is that any student who is considered full-time, now for this definition, when they are talking full-time, they're talking about 9 credits or more. When the student registers for 9 of those credits or more, they have to prove that they have health insurance, or the community college has to assume that they need health insurance. And I maybe spoke too limited just a second ago when I said the community college. Any college and university in Massachusetts has to do this. And so if we see that you have enrolled in 9 credits, which is great, many of our students would like to be full-time, we have to either prove that you have health insurance, or we have to assume that you need it. So for instance, in the spring, anybody who was enrolled over 9 credits but didn't tell the Bursar's office that they already had health insurance was enrolled in a spring only, so this is just for the spring term, health insurance plan, and the premium was $1,090, and that was added on to the student's invoice. Now if you already have health insurance, either through on your own, through an employer, through a spouse, or a family member, you wouldn't want to pay, obviously, that additional premium charge to have a secondary insurance plan. And so there's a process to let us know that you have insurance and to remove that charge. Now this is also an annual process, so if you're coming in the fall, you always want to do this in August, and it will cover you fall and spring. If you came just for this spring and you're planning to stay here with the fall, you would have had to waive it, or you should waive it now, with the Bursar's office, and they can assist you in this process. And I'm going to discuss these steps if you want to do it from home. But you're going to have to do this again in August. And again, it will cover you for the full academic year going forward. To waive this insurance, you want to go to the Bursar's office website. So you can go to the main GCC website, www.gcc.mass.edu. You can either go to Paying for College, or you can go to the search menu and type in Bursar. When you open their webpage, you want to go to the Insurance Overview tab, and go all the way to the bottom of the list where it says waiving the insurance charge. Now this is going to take you to a third-party billing site. There's a third-party vendor that has to vet every student waiver request. It does require you to set up an account. It's not going to charge you anything. Once you set this account up, it's good going forward. So similar to your FAFSA, once you know your username and password, you can log in every August. You can update your information, click submit, and it will take care of the charges going forward. You are going to have to submit your personal information, your student number, your health insurance provider, your health insurance ID number. So take that insurance card that many of us keep in our wallets or purses. You want to use that card and its information. You want to answer a few questions. And when you press the submit button, it goes into a database. Every morning we run a new batch to see if there are new students who have submitted a waiver, they can come off the insurance plan. You want to have a conversation with our Bursar's office if you're in the middle of the semester and you're trying to do this, okay? So don't hesitate to follow up and talk to them about that. Several students are surprised when they see this charge on their accounts when they have health insurance, and it's simply because we didn't know. And you want to get in the habit of doing this process, and this will be the same story at our institution as well as any other institution you plan on going to. So just become familiar with that process. And it's important to try to do this before the first day of classes so we can have an accurate bill to reduce the stress for you, to reduce any confusion that may be in our offices. But if you're just learning about this and this is a situation that's applying to you, you just want to take care of it now and have a conversation with the Bursar's office about what it means in your particular case. Okay, so that takes care of our first floor. Let's move on quickly to our third floor, and this is where the Neiman Watson Library exists. So they are in the core. They take up pretty much the entire third floor. They're also available off our website /library. A great resource to all students, faculty, and staff. We have an amazing staff, very talented, very capable. They love to work with students to help engage you in the learning process. They love working on research projects. Please don't be shy. Please make yourself known to these folks and let them share their knowledge and their resources with you. Great services in this space. It should be noted that during the fall and spring, 6 days a week of library services exist. So we do have late hours Monday through Thursday, open Friday and Saturday. There's over 40 hours a week of technology assistance in the library computer lab. So they have textbooks on reserve. The front circulation desk has many of the textbooks that your professors are requiring in class. So if you forgot your textbooks for today, or maybe you're trying to use a textbook while you're trying to arrange for the funding for textbooks that are expensive, often a faculty member has already put the textbook on reserve, and you feel free to use it by going to the circulation desk, asking to use it. It does have to stay in the library, so it's available for another student, but it's a great resource. There are private study rooms of varying sizes, so if you have small groups or you want to study alone, they're quiet spaces, all equipped with computers that you can use first come, first serve. Our databases in the public library network. We have thousands of titles within our own library, but our library is part of the Western Mass Network as well as national databases. So it has increased our access to resources exponentially. So you want to go in and have a conversation with our librarians about how can you use these databases and these other library systems to access the materials that you need for class, to do your research papers, to expand your knowledge base, and they'd be happy to do so. They do offer printers and copiers. There is some limitations on the free printing. Again, the computer lab has that tech support. There's very few reservations that occur in the computer lab. Every once in a while a class has reserved it for a presentation, but other than that, you can just go in, and if it's not being reserved, it's open for your use. And like we discussed before, they're happy to assist you with any of those projects. The important thing is you want to make sure that you have a library card. And again, Sarah's going to discuss some of the upcoming support services, and this will come back up. But you can either go up and work with the library staff to obtain a library card, or you can also take your student ID from the Student Activities Office up to the library, and they can use the backside of your student ID as your library card. You will need this access code to access any of those databases or e-journals or our video demand service off campus. When you're on campus, the computers have your login credentials, you're good to go. But if you're trying to do this and I will be guilty of this. I used to do many of my projects after work late at night, and so I heavily relied upon e-databases and the access to those. And if I did not have my library card, I would not have been able to do that. And so I want to make sure that all students realize that all you have to do is go up there and ask. It's free. It's part of the student services that you've already paid for. And so you want to make sure that you have access so that when you are working on those projects, there's nothing getting in your way. The very last thing that I want to talk to all of you before we conclude this unit is our bookstore. Our bookstore is located in the north on the first floor. Our bookstore is now operated by Follett. Follett is a national corporation that has a long history of providing college book services to many colleges and universities, and so they've been with us for just over 2 years now. They have your textbooks and software that you need for coursework on our shelves ready to go. They know months in advance what's being planned for the upcoming semester. They know what books each professor is expecting, and they've already ordered them for you. So it's usually a good idea to go in, make yourself familiar with the textbook store, familiar with the staff so that you can ask your questions, and then make an informed decision about how you want to secure your supplies. Any students who want to work with their financial aid office accounts, and so if you have an additional financial aid benefit that is not necessary for tuition or fees, but you'd like to use for textbooks or other purchases like that, the financial aid office can set you up with a bookstore account that Follett can access. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you want to make sure that you've had a conversation with both offices around that. And then that way you don't have to have cash to make these purchases, and you can debit that expense right to your student account. They also have all of your GCC clothing, which is popular with many of our students. And several of our students also need public transportation, so our FRTA bus passes, as well as meal cards for our food vendor, which is Fit to Vote. All of those things can be purchased here, and they can be purchased with your financial aid